And welcome. You're here with Chris Levels, the host of Politics and Prophecy, the internet version. I also have a radio show on WSNL, that is Victory 600 AM out of the Flint area, which I do Monday through Friday. And we are going to talk about a few things today. The first one, we're going to start off with a video from Molotov Mitchell, and he's discussing the Quran controversy. Again, we're going to listen to Reverend David Manning out of Harlem. We're going to talk about economics today. And this is going to be another show that I think you're going to find very interesting, very informational. And we are just going to sit back. Well, I'm going to let you sit back. I have to work to do this. But I hope you appreciate the effort. I hope you gain some knowledge, some wisdom, some understanding of what is going on today, as well as what we can do to turn this thing around. So let's start off with Molotov Mitchell dealing with the Quran.
Fan mail strikes again. Molotov Mitchell. I couldn't help but notice you're silent from the Quran burnings in Florida. You seem comfortable spewing conspiracy theories about Obama's birth certificate and how you want gays to be executed. So why so shy about a little book burning? So let's cut the bull. Do you support Terry Jones's burning of the Quran or not? May God be less? Tesla Ranger. Well, Tesla Ranger, Terry Jones never burned a Quran, but I know where you're coming from. And by the way, Barack Obama's birth certificate has become a mainstream issue. It's not a fringe conspiracy theory. And for the record, I have never called for the execution of homosexuals. See, unlike you colonialists who want to control the lives of Africans from afar, I actually believe in and support Ugandans' democratic right to pass their own legislation. And for the record, I would never burn a Quran. I'll tell you why.
I don't think we should burn the Quran. I'm a Christian environmentalist. But we should put that thing to use. I mean, at least get some toilet paper out of it.
Your kind of attitude is a really despicable attitude.
As I told the ever-tolerant Alan Combs, I would never burn a Quran. That's just senseless destruction of property. I'd expect backward desert tribes to do that. But we're Americans, man! We can do better! Don't get me wrong, the Quran is as insidious as Mein Kampf, which I personally keep a copy of on hand in case we ever run out of toilet paper, so it should be destroyed. But to just set something on fire, that's so caveman, so Muslim, really. I mean, those guys set everything on fire. And worst of all, it contributes to global warming. And you all know how I hate global warming. No, we should just mix the Quran into concrete and build churches with it, or use it to power cars. Now that's American. I have read the Quran several times. I have two different translations, one from before 9/11 and one after, and they are different. One sanitizes passages about taking hostages and striking at the necks of infidels, and one does not. I'll let you guess which one is which. So no, instead of burning the Quran, every Christian should read it to show themselves approved. Ignorance is bliss, sure, but knowledge is power. And if what Winston Churchill called the Christian civilization is to prevail, we need to know our enemy. So thank you, Tesla Ranger, for broaching such a wonderful topic. It's given me a great idea for next week's episode. You'll probably love it. Is it okay to burn a Bible?
Well, I don't know what you think concerning the Muslim controversy, but my mind is pretty made up. When I see somebody like the usurper in the White House that we have right now talking about the role of Muslims in the American history experiment, I want to choke somebody. But the fact of the matter is that the Muslims have had no part in American society in terms of the formation, in terms of the Constitution, in terms of the Civil War, in terms of our live World War I, World War II. They were not part of this fight in terms of maintaining freedom for the people in the United States. They weren't any part of it. So I tell you what, all of this stuff that's going on right now is just nuts. And I showed you a video in last week's show from Vienna, Austria, where these bloodthirsty individuals, because we all know that Muslim or Islam is basically a blood cult. That's what it is. It's not a religion. Well, I guess it is a religion because the people are religious about it. So please forgive me for saying that. It is a religion. These people are religious. They are pious about killing other folks. So, you know, when you see them cutting their own heads in Vienna, and that was the point was made that that ceremony was taking place in a European country, not a Muslim country, but a European country. What I'm about to show you is taking place in New York City, of all places, where these individuals took down 2 buildings and the Pentagon, well, damaged the Pentagon. And now this is what's happening, what's that, 9 years later, and it's been going on for some time. But I want to show you some pictures of what's taking place in America and see what you think. Keep going. Remember, this is, how about you women's groups? You like this one? Go ahead. And the literature. And by the way, they are teaming up with groups like the New Black Panthers and CARE and so forth and so on. But come on. Oh, my goodness. This is on the streets of America, people. This is not Iran. This is not Iraq. You know, these foot washing or bathing and whatever it is. I don't even care. I don't care if I'm politically correct. I could care less. All I know is I want that crap off of American streets. But, yep, look at this. Nope, it's not Saudi Arabia. It is New York. Wow. I mean, I want my daughter to dress modestly, but I think that's going a little too far. All right, what we got? We got any more? Okay. Well, let's move off of that. That is what you see going on in New York City. And it did look like Saudi Arabia to me. So I don't know, people. Maybe we need to stand up and, if these people do not want to assimilate, if they do not want to acknowledge the Constitution of the United States, but they want to have Sharia law, then I say we oblige them. We send them back to all the countries that practice Sharia law. But you will not take down my Constitution without a fight or my republic. So there you have my viewpoint on it. Now, if you can see this on the internet, you know what? It looks like I have a big head. And you know what? My head is getting bigger and bigger because it's about to explode from all the ignorance and apathy that's going on in the United States. Anytime, whether they be white, black, Hispanic, anytime I'm hearing somebody say, well, you asked them the question, why did you vote for Obama? Didn't you do any research? Well, I don't know. After what Bush did to us, we didn't have a choice. Okay, well, this is for you ignoramuses that don't understand the legislature, that don't understand how the government works, and, will be led around by your noses, by any media, people like Ted Turner, Rupert Murdoch, and Rupert Murdoch owns Fox, Ted Turner, CNN, and these people are what is called globalists. I wish I could do a Sesame Street thing for you today, what a globalist is. But these people control the media. They control not what you think, but what you think about. So let's go to this before we go to a video that's going to show you that I'm not just sitting here blowing smoke, but in actuality, what has actually happened, what George Bush tried to do while he was in office, even though I'm not a fan of everything that George Bush did. But let's set the record straight. Thomas Sowell explains why Democrats can't pass the buck on the U.S. economy. President Barack Obama proudly proclaims, "The buck stops here." But whenever his policies are criticized, he acts as if the buck stopped with George W. Bush. The party line that we are likely to be hearing from now until the November elections is that Obama inherited the big federal budget deficits and that he has to clean up the mess. Do you remember with him sitting there with a broom acting like he was sweeping up stuff? Left in the economy by the Republicans. This may convince those who want to be convinced, but it will not stand up under scrutiny. No president of the United States can either create a budget deficit or a budget surplus. Let me read that for you again, people. No president of the United States can create either a budget deficit or a budget surplus. All spending bills originate in the House of Representatives, and all taxes are voted into law by Congress. Democrats controlled both houses of Congress before Barack Obama became president. The deficit he inherited was created by the congressional Democrats, including Senator Barack Obama, who did absolutely nothing to oppose the runaway spending. He was one of the biggest of big spenders. He was also at the time voted the most liberal senator in the Senate in his little year and a half time that he was there. The last time the federal government had a budget surplus, Bill Clinton was president, so it was called the Clinton surplus. But Republicans controlled the House of Representatives, where all spending bills originate. For the first time in 40 years, it was also the first budget surplus in more than a quarter of a century. The only direct power that any president has that can affect deficits and surpluses is the power to veto spending bills. President Bush did not veto enough spending bills, but Senator Obama and his fellow Democrats in control of Congress were the ones who passed the spending bills. I hope you're catching all of this. Today, with Barack Obama in the White House, allied with Harry Reid and Nancy Scary Pelosi in charge in Congress, the national debt is a bigger share of the national output than it has been in more than half a century. And its share is projected to continue going up for years to come, becoming larger than national output in 2012. Having created this scary situation, President Obama now says, "Don't give in to fear. Let's reach for hope." Yeah, I hope you get kicked out of office. The voters reached for hope when they elected Obama. The fear comes from what he has done since taking office. "The worst thing we could do is go back to the very same policies that created this mess in the first place," Obama said recently. "In November, you're going to have that choice." Another political fable, however, is that the current economic downturn is due to not enough government regulation of the housing and financial markets. But it was precisely the government regulators under pressure from politicians who forced banks and other lending institutions to lower their standards for making mortgage loans. Might I add, with the help of groups like Acorn also, who, if banks didn't do enough in terms of lending to people that didn't deserve to get loans, then they would boycott the banks and they wouldn't be able to grow, so forth and so on. They basically indulged in extortion. These risky loans and the defaults that followed were set off a chain reaction of massive financial losses that brought down the whole economy. Was this due to George W. Bush and the Republicans? Only partly. Most of those who pushed the lowering of mortgage lending standards were Democrats, notably Congressman Barney Frank and Senator Christopher Dodd, though too many Republicans went along. At the heart of these policies were Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who bought huge amounts of risky mortgages, passing the risk on from the banks that lent the money and made the profits to the taxpayers who were not even aware that they would end up paying in the end. When President Bush said in 2004 that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac should be reined in, 76 members of the House of Representatives issued a statement to the contrary. These included Barney Frank, Nancy Pelosi, Maxine Waters, and Charles Rangel. If we are going to talk about the policies that created this mess in the first place, let's at least get the facts straight and the names right. The current policies of the Obama administration are a continuation of the same reckless policies that brought on the current economic problems, all in the name of change. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are still sacred cows in Washington, even though they have already required the biggest bailouts of all. Why? Because they allow politicians to direct vast sums of money where it will do politicians the most good, either personally or in terms of buying votes in the next election. For those of you that are interested, perhaps you should go and do some research on a man named Franklin Raines and how he got $90 million in 6 years from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Do some research before you just absent-mindedly take the claims of those spin doctors on the CNNs, the MSNBCs, the Alphabet networks, and even Fox. Do your own research. 2 Timothy 2:15 says, study to show thyself approved. Don't let some pastor form your thinking. Don't let some politician form your thinking. Accept the Spirit of God and let Him guide you in all wisdom and all understanding. So next, in order to back up what I've said, I want you to take a look at this that we have coming up right now.
Many financial analysts are saying that if mortgage giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac had been effectively regulated years ago, the supercharged subprime mortgage meltdown that led to the current financial mess would either never have happened or would have been nowhere near as severe. Chief White House correspondent Brett Baer rejoins us now to examine the timeline. What were those warning signs? Who raised them and who disputed them?
The Bush administration raised red flags starting in April 2001. The 02 budget request declares that the size of mortgage giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac is, quote, a potential problem because financial trouble in either one of them could, quote, cause strong repercussions in financial markets. In 2003, the White House warning about Fannie and Freddie was upgraded to a systemic risk that could spread beyond just the housing sector. In fall of 03, the Bush administration was pushing Congress hard to create a new federal agency to regulate and supervise Fannie and Freddie, both government-sponsored enterprises or GSEs.
We need a strong, world-class regulatory agency to oversee the prudential operations of the GSEs and the safety and the soundness of their financial activities.
But then Treasury Secretary Snow was getting a lot of pushback from then-ranking member, now chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, Democratic Congressman Barney Frank.
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are not in a crisis.
In fact, Frank said the federal government should be encouraging Fannie and Freddie to do more to get low-income families into homes. And he believed too many people had a sky-is-falling mentality.
The more people, in my judgment, exaggerate a threat of safety and soundness, the more people conjure up the possibility of serious financial losses to the Treasury, which I do not see. I think we see entities that are fundamentally sound financially and withstand some of the disaster scenarios. And even if there were a problem, the federal government doesn't bail them out. But the more pressure there is there, then the less I think we see in terms of affordable housing.
The legislation was blocked. In 2005, Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan added his voice on Fannie and Freddie after Fannie leaders admitted major accounting screw-ups. Quote, enabling these institutions to increase in size, and they will once the crisis in their judgment passes, we are placing the total financial system of the future at a substantial risk. Adding later at another hearing on the topic,
if we fail to strengthen GSE regulation, we increase the possibility of insolvency and crisis.
But the two mortgage giants had staunch defenders. Democratic Senator Charles Schumer said, quote, I think Fannie and Freddie over the years have done an incredibly good job and are an intrinsic part of making America the best housed people in the world. If you look over the last 20 or whatever years, they've done a very, very good job. Senator John McCain co-sponsored legislation pushing for regulation, delivering a speech on the Senate floor in 2006. Quote, "For years I have been concerned about the regulatory structure that governs Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And the sheer magnitude of these companies and the role they play in the housing market, the GSEs need to be reformed without delay." That bill made it out of the Senate Banking Committee with a party line vote. All of the Democrats voted against it, but fearing that they didn't have the votes to pass it, Republicans didn't even bring it up on the Senate floor. Senator Obama did not weigh in on that bill. Britt.
All right, Brett, thank you very much.
Okay, and you're back. So there you have it. Proof right out of the horse's mouth, and I use that term not to offend horses and using it in the same breath with Barney Frank. But that is what it is. And unfortunately, I wanted to play another clip from Reverend Manning, but we're not going to be able to do that today. And he's talking about the effects of 45 years of liberal policies on the black Americans, the black community. So, and actually it's kind of funny when you use that term because I don't live in a black community. I actually live in a community. I have white neighbors. I have Hispanic neighbors. I have who knows what. I mean, you know, I don't live in a black community. And even if you look around in some of the blighted areas in Flint, what is a black community? What is a white community? This is supposed to be America where we can live wherever we want to live. We should all be one community. So as I had a talk with my daughter this week when she was asking me about the Tea Party, and because of the fact that I'm on the ballot for lieutenant governor in the state of Michigan under the United States Taxpayer Party of Michigan, she thought I would make a good candidate for information for her paper. And I told her that one thing you have to be aware of is that you don't let the opposition form the debate. You know, by people calling you African American, coming up with all kind of different divisive activities in order to keep people at odds with one another and keep us distracted from what the ruling elite in this country are doing, pulling off, and what they are trying to do in terms of eliminating our sovereignty as well as our borders, forcing us into a one world government, using environmentalism. That's what, you know, global cooling, global warming, climate change. Now they're going to, I believe, Holdren is talking about man-made global disruption or something like this. It's all foolishness, people. The environmentalist movement is nothing but a watermelon. It's green on the outside, but it's red on the inside. Bunch of commies, bunch of socialists. Understand what's going on. Don't keep drinking this Kool-Aid. Do the research for yourself. I mean, they had ClimateGate. They swept that under the rug where people were plugging in false data to support the political agenda, not true science, but the political agenda. The polar bears are not dying, as ice caps are not melting. In fact, there's evidence that they're getting thicker. So, you know, come on, climate change. Would you even use that term? Are you using it? Climate change, I think that's what the weather does. I remember growing up, it said, you know, if you wanted the weather to change in Michigan, just wait 5 minutes. Were we under climate change? I don't think so. But, and it's too bad I don't have that video because I really wanted you to hear what Reverend Manning was saying in terms of the damage and destruction that liberal policies have done on the inner cities. That's what I'll use because blacks are not the only people that have been affected in the inner cities. You have whites that are living here. As I was coming down to this studio today in this neighborhood, I mean, you have white people that are affected. Their pocketbooks, they've been put out of their homes in foreclosures, which I just heard today. J.P. Morgan, they're freezing 56,000 foreclosures because of some paperwork or illegal evictions. I mean, there's so many people that are suffering. We have to get over it. And until we recognize the principle that God is no respecter of person, he's no respecter of color or ethnicity or gender. I mean, I don't understand it. I really don't. But I thank God that he has allowed me to have a new mind by filling me with his spirit so that I can understand things better. But in terms of why so many blacks, 96% would vote for policies that are causing the suicide of, okay, let's say their communities, let's just take a shot at trying to explain the rationale behind this kind of thinking. And Dennis Prager, who is a talk show host, wrote this article, and it says that if you're not a leftist, why do you vote Democrat? And he explains the emotional grip that sways Americans from the GOP. All Americans, including conservatives, understand why any leftist would vote Democrat this year. The Democratic Party is now America's version of European Social Democrat or even Green Party. In domestic policy, there is no significant difference between the Americans and European parties. So there is no question as to why those on the left would vote Democrat. There is, however, a legitimate question regarding non-leftist Americans. Why would any of them vote for a Democrat this year? The Democratic president and Democratic Party have expanded the American government to an unprecedented extent. Moreover, they have done so in unprecedented ways. Never before has such extensive society-changing legislation been passed without a single vote of the other political party. And unprecedentedly, vast powers have been given to czars and their new federal agencies with no congressional oversight. Add to this a level of national debt that is unsustainable, but meets the left's great aim of redistributing wealth. And you have the most left-wing government in American history. Why then would any of the vast majority of Americans who are not leftists vote Democratic this year? The answer lies in emotion. For many non-leftist Democrats, it is emotionally impossible to vote Republican. I can illustrate this best with a personal example that I often use in speeches to Jewish audiences. I was raised both as an Orthodox Jew and a liberal Democrat. In my early 20s, not wanting to practice religious laws solely out of habit or fear, I experimented with religious non-observance. I remember well the one time this yeshiva graduate ate ham. It was emotionally difficult. I also well remember the first time this lifelong Democrat voted Republican. And it, too, was difficult. In fact, it was actually more emotionally difficult to vote Republican than to eat ham. Now, how could that be? How could it possibly have been more emotionally trying for a lifelong Democrat to vote Republican than for a lifelong observant Jew to eat ham? Isn't religion a far deeper conviction than politics? The question implies the answer. Liberalism and leftism are religions. While I felt I would be sinning against God when I tasted ham, I was certain I was sinning against both God and man were I to vote Republican. That is how liberals, not to mention leftists, think. It is a grievous sin to vote Republican unless the Republican is a liberal. One is abandoning their faith, values, community, and very identity. But it is more than that. What keeps most non-leftists voting Democrat and calling themselves liberal has been the spectacularly effective saturation of virtually all media and all educational institutions with the message that the right is mean-spirited and dangerous. One of the first books I ever owned in high school was titled Danger on the Right. Throughout the world, people are fed the message, danger on the right, and virtually never danger on the left. Despite the left's far bloodier and more totalitarian record. And let me stop right there, because in the 20th century, these people on the left, these totalitarian governments, authoritarian governments, were responsible for the deaths of over 100 million people in the 20th century through their wars, through their coups, through their genocides. People on the left, not the right. The majority of people who vote Democratic do not have left-wing values. Only 20% of Americans even consider themselves liberal. But vast numbers of people with views that are not leftist have been effectively brainwashed. One cannot come up with a more accurate word. Interfering the right when the threats to their liberty as well as to America's standing in the world, its exceptionalism, and its economic future all emanate from the left. That is why nearly all Democratic and leftist reactions to conservatives and Republicans are to avoid argument. Remember, on the issues the left has few supporters. And smear them as 6HERB, my acronym for sexist, intolerant, xenophobic, homophobic, Islamophobic, racist, bigoted. It is almost impossible to come up with the name of a leading conservative whom the dominant media have not dismissed as one or more of 6HERB, and usually as a buffoon as well. This obviously serves the left and the Democratic Party in many ways, but the most important is to keep non-leftists in fear of anyone who opposes the left. In effect, the left says, and has been saying for 100 years, you may not agree with us, but our opponents are evil. The Democratic appeal to black voters provides an excellent example. In nearly half a century, the left has done nothing for black America. Leftists have ruined the cities they govern and most of the public schools they control. But they have mastered one thing, the ability to paint their opponents as racist opponents of blacks. So blacks, many of whom have conservative values, from opposing same-sex marriage to supporting school vouchers, vote almost universally for the left. The same holds true of most American Jews. Most live profoundly conservative lives, but vote left. Why? Overwhelmingly because they believe there is danger on the right. It doesn't matter how anti-Israel the left is and how pro-Israel the right is, or that liberal Time magazine has a mendacious cover story on why Israel doesn't care about peace, while every major conservative periodical is passionately protective of Israel. For most Jews, voting Republican is a far greater sin, emotionally, morally, and socially than eating ham. That is why virtually every liberal columnist at New York Times has described political opposition to Barack Obama as racist. The left cannot win on arguments. It must demonize its opponents. From Stalin calling Trotsky a fascist to Frank Rich labeling the Tea Parties as mimicking the Nazis' Kristallnacht. This has been the favorite leftist method of achieving power, and that is why it remains so hard for most Democrats to vote what they believe and vote Republican. A lifetime of demonization has worked. And unfortunately, that is very, very, very true. A lifetime of it has worked. And now we're at a point where they've had control of the public schools for about 160 years, through Hollywood, through TV, through academia. There has been a revolution in this country. It wasn't like the Revolutionary War of 1776 to 1783. This was something that took place gradually or progressively as far as what they did. They've had an agenda, and they're right at the point, we're at the abyss right now of whether they're going to completely enslave us as a people. We are sacrificing, I believe it was Benjamin Franklin that said that a people sacrifices security for liberty for security deserves neither. So that's where we're at right now. And speaking of, I talked about the economy earlier. We're going to go back to what we can actually, if this keeps taking place, what is going on, what has been going on. And let me make this perfectly clear. You see, I'm not limited in scope to blaming Obama for everything because I know better. I understand the progressive agenda. I understand that these people, what they want to accomplish and what they are accomplishing. In fact, the dumbing down of America to where you don't even know what's going on. And you sit there and listen to the pundits make up your mind. They shape your reality because you've gone to these schools. They've shaped the way you think. And so we go along with it. They tell us Obama's a bad man. We say Obama's a bad man. They say George Bush is a bad man. We say George Bush is a bad man. We say these people are racist. They say it, then we say it. Well, you know what? That's behavior of sheep. As a matter of fact, there's a term for it. It's called sheeple. So let's put people in power to govern over us that actually do believe and acknowledge the presence of the Creator, the one who created each and every one of us. Let us at least go back to the fact that we're humble enough to understand that we created this mess through rebellion, through disobedience. But what I want to show you now is what the effects of a welfare state, what the end game is. It cannot be avoided. It's happening in Europe and soon to a street near you. Let's talk about anti-austerity protest sweep across Europe. Let's cue the video there. All right. Anti-austerity protest erupted across Europe on Wednesday, and this is yesterday, by the way. Greek doctors and railway employees walked out. Spanish workers shut down trains and buses, and one man even blocked the Irish Parliament with a cement truck to decry the country's enormous bank bailouts. Tens of thousands of demonstrators marched through the streets of Brussels toward European Union buildings in bright red, green, and blue labor union jackets, aiming to reinforce the impact of Spain's first nationwide strike in 8 years. Strikes or protests were also taking place Wednesday in Greece, Portugal, Ireland, Slovenia, and Lithuania, all aimed at the budget-slashing, tax-hiking, pension-cutting austerity plans that European governments have implemented to try to control their debt. The march in Brussels was taking place just as the EU Commission proposed new penalties to punish member states that have run up deficits, mainly to fund social programs in a time of high employment. The proposal, backed by Germany, is running into strong opposition from France, which wants politicians to decide on sanctions, not rigid rules alone. It is a bizarre time for the European Commission to be proposing a regime of punishment, John Monks, General Secretary of the European Trade Union Confederation, told Associated Press Television News. How is that going to make the situation better? It is going to make it worse. Unions fear that workers will become the biggest victims of an economic crisis set off by bankers and traders, many of whom were rescued by massive government intervention. It is not right that people on low salaries have to pay to prop up the country. It should be the banks, said Belgian demonstrator Evelyn Fonsis. Does any of this sound familiar? Several governments already living dangerously with high debt were pushed to the brink of financial collapse and have been forced to impose punishing cuts in wages, pensions, and unemployment, measures that have brought workers out by the tens of thousands. Over the unions fear workers will become the biggest victims of an economic crisis set off by bankers and traders, many of whom were rescued by massive government intervention. Even in this article, you can see that here the union is sitting up here blaming the bankers and the traders when we know good and well that the unions were a part of this problem. It's not right that people on low salaries have to prop up the country. It should be on the banks. Several governments already living dangerously with high debt were pushed to the brink of financial collapse and have been forced to impose punishing cuts in wages, pensions, and employment, measures that have brought workers out by the tens of thousands over the past months. There is a great danger that the workers are going to be paying the price for the reckless speculation that took place in financial markets, Monks said. You really got to reschedule these debts so that they are not a huge burden on the next few years and cause Europe to plunge down into recession. In other words, let me translate this for you. What it's saying is we will push these debts off on our children so that we don't have to feel the pain. The strike Wednesday in Spain was the country's first general strike since 2002 and marked a break in the once close relationship between unions and the socialist government. Spanish Prime Minister Jose Luis Rodriguez Zapatero government is under severe pressure because of unpopular measures put in place to save Europe's fourth largest economy from a bailout like the one that saved Greece from bankruptcy in May. The cuts have helped Spain trim its central government deficit by half through July, but the unemployment rate still stands at a shocking 20%, and many businesses are struggling to survive. Whistleblowing picketers blocked trucks from delivering produce to wholesale markets in Madrid and Barcelona. Strikers hurled eggs and screamed scabs at drivers trying to leave a city bus garage in Madrid. Airlines canceled hundreds of flights at Spanish airports. Greece, which had to be rescued this spring by the 15 other nations that share the euro currency just to stave off bankruptcy, has also been forced to cut deep into workers' allowances, with weeks of bitter strikes and actions as a result. Greek bus and trolley drivers walked off the job for several hours, and Athens metro and tram systems also shut down. National railway workers also walked out, disrupting rail connections across the country, while doctors at state hospitals went on a 24-hour strike. Greece has already been suffering from 2 weeks of protests by truck drivers who have made it difficult for businesses to get supplies. Many supermarkets are seeing shortages. Greece's socialist government has imposed stringent austerity measures, including cutting civil servant salaries. Wow, I like that idea. Trimming pensions and hiking consumer and income taxes. See, how does this work? You have less money, you have less people working, but then you hike the taxes on people. Something's not right, people. Something's not right. In Dublin, police arrested a 41-year-old man who blocked the Irish Parliament with a cement truck but gave few other details. His slogan on the truck, Toxic Bank Anglo, referred to the Anglo-Irish Bank, which was nationalized last year to save it from collapse. The bank owes some 72 billion euro, which is $97 billion, to depositors worldwide, leaving Irish taxpayers with a mammoth bill at a time when people are suffering through high unemployment, tax hikes, and heavy budget cuts. Also Wednesday, some 400 protesters rallied in an illegal demonstration in the Lithuanian capital of Vilnius to demand authorities cease harsh austerity measures such as salary cuts. All of working Europe is on the streets today to express dismay over nearsighted income-cutting politics. A 40-year-old engineer who lost his job this year commented. In Slovenia, thousands of public service workers continued their open-ended strike to protest the government's plan to freeze their salaries for 2 years, or until the economy grows again at a rate of 3%. Unions in Portugal expected some 30,000 people to show up for demonstrations after Wednesday. So, there you have it, folks. You see, you've been seeing what's on the screen there. This is what's really going on in the world. We get stories in the United States about Lindsay Lohan and her stupid behavior. We get stories, about some guy that wants to or threatens to burn a Koran. But this is real life. This is about putting food on the table. This is about feeding your children. And this welfare state that has been set up, that was actually started basically under FDR, that he did what he did concerning the New Deal, even threatening to pack the Supreme Court with 15 judges because the 9 wouldn't pass his New Deal policies, and then they backed down, and basically it's been downhill ever since. We did manage to win World War II, but all that did was set us up for where we are now. So, I'm going to go ahead and let Mr. Molotov entertain you for a couple of minutes here, and then I will be back. Are we ready?
Look, see the sights that you like. AT&T covers 97% of all Americans.
Okay, I guess we are having some technical problems today. And we're going to talk about some of the people here that are behind the chaos in the economic markets of what's going on. It's not Obama, it's not Barack, it's not Bush. But when you understand names like George Soros, you understand their backgrounds, you understand what they're setting out to do and what they've already accomplished, it becomes pretty scary. Maurice Strong is a Canadian. Of course, he probably doesn't view himself that way. He views himself as a globalist. And, you know, Barack Obama comes out saying that he wants to fundamentally transform America. That should have been the first alarm bells going off. And he wants to change the free world to a one world government. And he begins, Maurice Strong is somebody that I guess you would compare to the Austin Powers character, Dr. Evil. And actually Soros is the financier, but Maurice Strong is the puppet master. And I want to share this. It's by Judy McLeod. And she says, great job on shining the Fox flashlight on a man behind the curtain, Maurice Strong. An expose on him. And she said, you asked for people to send you information on Strong. While the entire cable network Strong is on the Chicago Carbon Credit Exchange Board of Directors, it gets worse, much worse. It's true that Strong explained that he had only fantasized the end of the world in his now famous interview with a Canadian reporter. Unfortunately for the free world, the fantasy is Strong's philosophy. As recently as 2006, speaking from an air-conditioned boardroom somewhere in communist China, Maurice Strong, the same man who would deny air conditioning for you to save the environment, was hatching his latest anti-American initiative. Having cashed in his Kyoto credits and having launched his Mini One internet project from afar, Strong is back on the international scene, ready or not. With his latest comeback, the elusive Strong is stepping back into the limelight after his alleged links to the UN oil for food scandal that took him off the radar screen for more than a year. This comeback sees Strong teaming up in the biz world with George Soros. The deadly duo aims to flood the American market with cheap Chinese-made cars. You auto workers out there in America, I think you can verify the validity of that statement. Strong's public predictions that China would replace the United States as world superpower is not happening fast enough. So Strong and President George W. Bush's malcontent George Soros are contemplating pouring hundreds of millions into a communist China automaker that manufactures the Cherry, and that spells Chery for those of you that would like to look it up. So Strong and Soros were working on anti-American schemes as far back as 2006. They had hoped to decimate Ford, Chrysler, and GM by flooding the U.S. market with cheapo cherries on a 2007 deadline. But it doesn't even begin or stop there. Maurice Strong has almost as much impact on average Americans as the air that they breathe. All that President Barack Obama is doing to transform America and the free world over to one world government begins and ends with one Maurice Strong. Soros is merely the financier. Here, in his own words, is what Strong wants for the middle class. It is clear that current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving high meat intake, consumption of large amounts of frozen and convenience foods, use of fossil fuels, appliances, home and workplace air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable. A shift is necessary towards lifestyles less geared toward environmentally damaging consumption patterns. This is coming from a man who probably has multiple private jets as well as yachts, as well as homes, but you get the hypocrisy. Strong's portrayal as a Wizard of Oz in a fog of ether was helped along by Canada's state-owned liberal and largest television network, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. The CBC 2004 special, The Life and Times of Maurice Strong, features a visit by Strong to former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, who gives Strong a CBC-described glass saber full of the same brandy Stalin used to send Winston Churchill every week. You could say that it's downright Machiavellian how Strong and Gorbachev consorted back in 1997 to replace the Ten Commandments with the UN Earth Charter. Look it up, UN Earth Charter. It's not good stuff. Although it defies belief, their jointly authored Earth Charter is carried around in a wooden chest called the Ark of Hope. I'm not making this up, folks. The Ark of Hope is described as a magnificent large sycamore chest, which was conceived as a visual message of peace, sustainability, and concern for the earth. Gilt-covered and lavish in the Lux department, the chest carries Temenos Earth Mask. The 96 poles of the 200-pound chest are unicorn horns, which render evil ineffective. The Ark carries Gorby's and Strong's Earth Charter, an international people's treaty, need of which was foreseen and initiated at the Strong-led Rio Earth Summit in 1992. At last count, the Ark was being carried into New York classrooms. And if you really, we just did a program today on the radio portion of Politics and Prophecy about the UN's efforts to internationalize classrooms. So if you want to go there, you can go to realityrevival.com, and it will be downloaded in a few days so you can hear what these people are about at the UN. Now you know, Glenn, why Strong is too busy to write novels. Besides, it must be so much more fun rewriting history. Lest you think CFP is pulling your leg, this is what Gorbachev has to say about the Earth Charter. The 10 Commandments are out of date. They will be replaced by the 18 principles of the Earth Charter. Let me read that again. The 10 Commandments, this is what Mikhail Gorbachev, who is still alive, who still has a role in this coming one world government, this is what he said. The 10 Commandments are out of date. They will be replaced by the 18 principles of the Earth Charter. It is CFP's belief that the way for the Messiah was cleared for Barack Obama by Maurice Strong, and that Louis Farrakhan was right on the money when he said, before he was elected, he was selected, speaking about Obama. So how does Maurice Strong get away with it? By relying on the media-hyped conspiracy theory charges. You know, those rednecks still waiting for the black helicopters. Meanwhile, when Glenn pulled the curtain back on the international man of mystery, Maurice Strong, last night, he hit the mother lode. So this is what I am trying, this is the kind of information that I really want to bring to you. I mean, there are things going on in this world as far as spiritual wickedness that whether you believe it or not, you know, you might be, calling yourself a Christian, but, you belong to a church that has a homosexual priest or a pastor. They've approved benefits for same-sex relationships right in the church. You've got a UN charter right now that wants to take away your rights as a parent. It's called Hillary Clinton has been sponsoring this thing, something about the UN children's rights or something like that. But if you get a chance to read it, you really should, and understand the fact that if your child doesn't want to go to church and you make them go to church, that child can call a social worker, and then you're going to be the one that's going to be in handcuffs. You can be questioned. Your children can be taken away from you. There's all kind of just evil stuff that is going on right now, people. I mean, it seems like Satan has waited and bided his time until, the last country, as far as a bastion of freedom, the people had become so dumbed down that they would accept anything in a trade for so-called security. But let me assure you, the only security comes in salvation. And that price was paid for you through Jesus Christ. So let's not forget that, because we have some things on the horizon that are coming down the pipe that are really going to test your faith if you are a believer. And if you are not, then, well, it's still not going to be that pleasant for you. So I think I'm going to end the show here. And I want to say that I've enjoyed the time here today with you. I'm looking forward to being back with you on next Thursday. Please share this show with others and join me again at WSNLradio.com to listen to a live stream of the radio show Monday through Friday on AM 600. You can also go to AM 600 and hear me also. So come back, look at the other shows on this link on flinttalkradio.com. There are some really good people here, and there's a lot of information here. So take advantage of the resource that you have in your area, and people that do care about freedom, about liberty for this country, for everyone that is here and that loves the Constitution. So God bless you. Love each and every one of you. Bye-bye.